Under the scorching African sun, the dusty road leading to the Maasai village of Ankara slowed to a crawl, but not because of an accident. Something much smaller, much wilder, had brought vehicles to a halt. A tiny lion cub, desperate and determined, blocked the path, refusing to retreat. Nashipae, a skilled Maasai tracker and wildlife guardian, had seen her share of strange encounters, but nothing quite like this. As she approached the trembling creature, she realized it wasn't just lost or injured, it was trying to tell them something. And when she saw the glint of metal strapped to its neck, she knew somewhere beyond the savanna, a mystery was waiting for her to uncover. What could a wild lion cub possibly be leading them toward? And why did it seem to be waiting for help? What started as a routine patrol would soon uncover a life-or-death mystery that no one saw coming. The summer sun beat down on the red dirt road connecting the Maasai territories in the Serengeti region of Tanzania, creating shimmering heat waves that danced above the parched earth. Traffic moved steadily, the usual flow of safari vehicles and local transport heading north toward Arusha or south to the scattered villages, their passengers oblivious to the drama unfolding ahead. Nashipae adjusted her traditional red shuka cloth against the glare, her keen eyes scanning the road from her position in the open-top Land Cruiser. At 32, she'd been working with the Maasai Wildlife Conservation Trust for 9 years, and rarely did wildlife incidents warrant her immediate attention. But something about this call felt different. Reports of a small, aggressive animal disrupting the main road wasn't something she could ignore. As the lead tracker for her community, Nashipae had earned respect from both her tribe and the wildlife authorities. Her grandmother had been a legendary tracker, and the gift ran deep in her blood. Nashipae, this is Samuel at the community center. We've had 3 more calls. Travelers are saying it's a lion cub, but acting very strange. Not running away, the radio crackled. Nashipae's interest peaked. In her experience, lion cubs fled from roads and people, especially without their pride. Something wasn't right. She spotted the commotion before she reached the designated location. A cluster of vehicles pulled to the side, drivers standing outside, pointing and taking photos with their phones. Several Maasai herders had formed a protective circle, keeping curious onlookers at a safe distance with their traditional rungu clubs and spears. With practiced efficiency, Nashipae pulled up behind the last vehicle. As she stepped out, the hot African air hit her like a physical force. She adjusted the beaded collar around her neck and approached Olakina, an elder from a neighboring village who appeared to be coordinating the crowd. "Supa, Olakina," she greeted him respectfully. "What's happening here?" The old man nodded gravely. "Supa, Nashipae. There's a lion cub, very young. It's been trying to cross for nearly half an hour now. Runs out, then retreats. Almost caused an accident when a truck had to swerve." Nashipae nodded, her trained eyes scanning the area. "Has anyone tried to approach it?" "No. Wild animal, and the cub seems determined. Almost like it wants our attention." He hesitated. "I've been tracking lions for 50 years, Nashipae. I've never seen this behavior." Nashipae thanked the elder and walked carefully toward the roadside, her movements fluid and confident. She'd dealt with dangerous wildlife before, and even a young lion could be unpredictable if frightened or injured. Then she saw it, a small lion cub, no more than 3 or 4 months old, its golden coat dusty from the red earth. It paced nervously at the edge of the road, making small darting movements toward the center before retreating when vehicles approached. Nashipae kept her distance, observing. There was something deliberate about its behavior. This wasn't an animal randomly crossing a road. It seemed frantic, purposeful in its attempts. She raised her binoculars for a closer look, and that's when she noticed it. A small tracking collar around the cub's neck with what appeared to be an orange emergency tag attached to it. The lion cub wasn't entirely wild. Nashipae retreated to her vehicle and radioed the regional wildlife office. Within 25 minutes, a dust-covered pickup truck with the Tanzania National Parks Authority logo pulled up beside her Land Cruiser. Dr. Jabari Mkwawa emerged, a tall man in his late 50s with weathered skin and alert eyes that missed nothing. He'd been the regional wildlife veterinarian for over 25 years, and if anyone knew what to make of this, it would be him. "Dr. Mkwawa," Nashipae extended her hand. Thank you for coming so quickly. Call me Jabari, he replied, shaking her hand firmly. When they said a Maasai tracker was calling about a collared lion cub blocking the road, I had to see this myself. Nashipae briefed him as they walked toward the roadside, their movements slow and non-threatening. There, she pointed. See the collar? Jabari raised his own binoculars, adjusting the focus. Mungo wangu, he muttered in Swahili. That's not one of our standard tracking collars. What do you mean? Wildlife Services uses GPS collars, usually much bulkier. This is different, smaller, and that orange tag. He continued observing, then his eyes widened. That's an emergency beacon. The kind we issue to researchers doing fieldwork in remote areas. The lion cub spotted them and, instead of running away, moved closer. It stopped about 20 feet from them, made a small, urgent sound, almost a distressed mew, then turned and took several steps toward the acacia woodland that bordered the road, looking back at them expectantly. It wants us to follow, Jabari said, amazement in his voice. Like in the old stories, Nashipae said, remembering her grandmother's tales of animals guiding warriors to water or warning of danger. I know how it sounds, but I've worked with wildlife for decades, Jabari said. I've never seen a lion cub behave like this. He squinted at the orange tag. Can I borrow your binoculars? Mine aren't strong enough for the detail. Nashipae handed them over, and Jabari focused intently on the device. There's a designation on it, DM 5821. That's not a wildlife tag. His face paled slightly. Nashipae, that's an emergency beacon from the Serengeti Research Institute. We use them for field researchers working alone in dangerous areas. Why would a lion cub have a researcher's emergency beacon? Good question. Let me make a call. Jabari retreated to his truck, returning 5 minutes later with a grave expression. I just spoke with the research station at Oldaway. They've had a missing researcher since yesterday evening. Dr. David Murayuki, 45, experienced field biologist. He was conducting a solo observation study but missed his scheduled radio check-in last night. Nashipae's instincts sharpened. And the beacon number? DM are his initials, David Murayuki. 5821 was his research permit number. They both looked at the lion cub, which was still waiting, occasionally making that same urgent sound. This doesn't make sense, Nashipae said. How would a lion cub end up with a researcher's beacon? Jabari's expression was thoughtful. There might be an explanation. Let me check something. He pulled out his tablet and scrolled through several files. Here, Dr. Murayuki's research focuses on orphaned lion rehabilitation. He's been working with the wildlife sanctuary in Arusha for years. Nashipae looked at the cub with new understanding. So this could be one of his research subjects? It's possible. But if that's the case, why is the cub here and David isn't? The implication hung heavy between them. The lion cub made another sound, more insistent this time, and took several more purposeful steps toward the woodland. Nashipae made a decision. I'm going to follow it. If there's any chance it knows where Dr. Murayuki is, we have to try. I'm coming with you, Jabari interrupted. If David is injured, we'll need medical supplies. He hurried back to his truck and returned with a backpack, basic first aid, water, and emergency rations. Standard search and rescue equipment. Nashipae radioed the community center to update them on the situation and request additional support. We have a potential missing researcher connected to this lion cub. Dr. Mkwawa and I are going to investigate, requesting backup and search teams on standby. Understood, Nashipae. The Maasai patrol unit is mobilizing, but they're 40 minutes out. The Wildlife Authority has been notified. Please maintain radio contact. Understood. The lion cub, seeming to sense their decision, turned and trotted toward the tree line, looking back periodically to ensure they were following. Never thought I'd be following a lion cub into the bush, Nashipae muttered, her hand instinctively checking her radio and the traditional knife at her belt. Nature has a way of surprising us, Jabari replied, especially when humans get involved. As they entered the woodland, the temperature dropped noticeably under the canopy of acacia and baobab trees. The lion cub stayed about 40 feet ahead, visible enough to follow but maintaining its distance. It's staying on a clear path, Jabari observed. That's another sign this isn't typical wild behavior. A truly wild cub would use more cover, especially with humans nearby. Nashipae nodded, her eyes scanning the ground with the expertise of generations of trackers. There, she pointed. Boot prints. Recent ones. Jabari knelt to examine them. Good. These are fresh, maybe a day old. Men's hiking boot, European style. Size 43 or 44. They continued following the cub, which maintained its steady pace. About 2 kilometers into the woodland, they came across a clearing where the undergrowth had been disturbed. Broken branches, flattened grass, and most concerning, spots of what appeared to be dried blood on several leaves and rocks. Someone passed through here in distress, Nashipae said, her voice low. Or fell. Jabari added, pointing to a steep embankment at the edge of the clearing that hadn't been immediately visible. Look at the slide marks. The lion cub had stopped at this point, pacing anxiously near the edge and making that same urgent sound they'd heard earlier. It approached the embankment, then looked back at them with those amber eyes, pleading. Nashipae and Jabari exchanged glances, then carefully made their way to the edge. Below was a rocky ravine, about 40 feet deep, with a seasonal stream cutting through the bottom. And there, partially concealed by fallen branches and thornbush, was a human form. David! Jabari called out. Dr. Murayuki! The figure moved slightly, raising an arm in what might have been a wave or a plea for help. He's alive, Nashipae said with relief, then into her radio, This is Nashipae. We've located the missing researcher. Ravine approximately 2 kilometers east of the main road near the Ankara junction. Subject is alive but injured. Requesting immediate medical evacuation and rescue equipment. Copy that, Nashipae. Rescue team is mobilizing. ETA 1 hour to your location. Can you reach him? Nashipae assessed the ravine. The sides were steep but not vertical, with enough handholds and vegetation to make a descent possible. It's manageable. We're going down. I'll update you when we reach him. Be careful, Nashipae. Lion country down there. Always am. They carefully made their way down the slope, using exposed roots and rocks for support. The lion cub surprised them by finding its own path down, moving with the natural agility of its species, leaping from rock to rock with practiced ease. When they reached the bottom, they found Dr. David Murayuki conscious but clearly in severe distress. His leg was trapped under a large fallen log, and his face was pale from exposure, dehydration, and pain. But when he saw the lion cub approach, a weak smile crossed his cracked lips. Simba, he whispered hoarsely. Good boy. The cub, Simba, approached cautiously and nuzzled against David's outstretched hand, making a soft rumbling sound. Jabari immediately set to work examining David while Nashipae provided water and radioed in more detailed information about his condition. Compound fracture of the left femur, possible head trauma, severe dehydration, exposure, Jabari reported. But vitals are stable. David, can you tell us what happened? David took a shaky breath, wincing in pain. I was tracking Simba. Part of his rehabilitation assessment. He's an orphan I've been raising for 8 months, preparing him for eventual release into a protected area. He paused, his voice weakening. Yesterday evening, there was a sudden storm. Lightning scared him. He ran, which is natural. But the rain made the ground unstable here. This log. He gestured weakly at his trapped leg. Couldn't reach my main radio beacon. It was in my pack, somewhere up there. He gestured vaguely upward. So I attached my emergency backup beacon to Simba's collar. I've been training him with road recognition, teaching him that roads mean safety, mean humans who can help. David's voice filled with emotion. I told him to go to the road. To find help. I wasn't sure he'd understand, but I had to try. Nashipae and Jabari exchanged astonished looks. You trained a lion cub to seek human help? Nashipae asked, incredulous. David managed a small laugh that turned into a grimace of pain. Not exactly training like you train a dog. Simba was orphaned at 6 weeks, his mother killed by poachers. He imprinted on humans during his early weeks before I got him. Part of his rehabilitation has been creating controlled associations. Roads equal humans. Humans equal food and safety when he's distressed. His eyes glistened. I had faith in him. Faith that the bond we'd built meant something. Simba had settled next to David, his small body pressed against the researcher's side, watching Nashipae and Jabari with cautious but trusting eyes. "It's incredible," Jabari said, carefully examining David's trapped leg. "You essentially created an emergency protocol using natural behavior and learned associations." "I had no choice," David whispered. "And I knew Simba was smart enough." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of coordinated activity. The Maasai patrol unit arrived first, bringing rope and additional medical supplies. They were followed by the Wildlife Authority's rescue team with proper extraction equipment. As the teams worked to carefully lift the heavy log from David's leg, Simba remained nearby, watchful but not interfering. Several of the Maasai warriors, despite their traditional hunting background, looked at the young lion with something approaching respect. Olakina, the elder, stood beside Nashipae as they watched the rescue operation. "Your grandmother would have said this cub has a warrior's heart," he said quietly. "In the old days, we had stories of lions who helped our people. I thought they were just stories." "Perhaps the stories were memories," Nashipae replied, watching Simba's alert, protective posture. When David was finally freed and placed on a stretcher, he called out weakly, "Simba, someone needs to care for him. He's not ready for full release. He needs—" "I'll take responsibility for him," Jabari interrupted. "Until you're recovered, David. You have my word." Relief washed over David's pain-etched face. "His supplies, at my research camp. Grid coordinates 3.2s, 35.1e. Everything he needs is there." "We'll find it," Jabari assured him. "Focus on healing." As David was being carried up the ravine on the stretcher, Simba tried to follow, making small distress sounds. Nashipae, acting on instinct, knelt down to the cub's level. "Pull, Simba," she said softly in Swahili, using the word for sorry or gentle. "He's going to get help. He's going to be okay. And you did something incredible today." Simba regarded her with those intelligent amber eyes, and for a moment, Nashipae felt a connection that transcended species, a recognition of shared purpose. The story of Dr. David Muriuki and Simba the lion cub spread like wildfire across Tanzania and then internationally. Researcher's life saved by lion cub he raised became a global headline. The heartwarming tale of an orphaned lion rescuing the man who'd given him a second chance captured imaginations worldwide. Social media exploded with the story. Videos of Simba blocking the road, taken by travelers, went viral. News outlets from around the world descended on Tanzania, wanting to interview everyone involved. 3 weeks later, Nashipae found herself driving to the Serengeti Research Institute where David worked. She'd been asked to give a presentation about the rescue to a gathering of conservation organizations, and she'd readily agreed. The story had touched something deep within her, a reminder that the old ways, the connection between her people and the animals they'd lived alongside for millennia, still had relevance in the modern world. The institute was situated on pristine land near the Ngorongoro Conservation Area, a series of modern research facilities surrounded by large, naturalistic enclosures for wildlife rehabilitation. Nashipae was greeted by a young research assistant who led her to a sunny room where Dr. David Muriuki sat in a wheelchair, his casted leg propped up on a cushioned rest. "Nashipae," he smiled, extending his hand. "Karibu. Welcome. It's good to finally meet you properly. Last time I was somewhat incapacitated." Nashipae laughed, shaking his hand. "You were handling a compound fracture better than most people handle a stubbed toe. How are you healing?" "Slowly but surely. The doctors say I'll be back in the field in 3 months." His face grew more serious. "I owe you my life. You and Dr. Mkwawa. If you hadn't trusted Simba, hadn't followed him." "Simba saved you," Nashipae interrupted gently. "We just listened to what he was trying to tell us." "How is he?" Nashipae asked. "I've been wondering." David's face lit up. Why don't you see for yourself? We're about to do his afternoon enrichment session. He wheeled himself toward a large observation window overlooking a spacious enclosure. Dr. Jabari Mkwawa was already there, and he greeted Nashipae warmly. Nashipae, good to see you again. You're just in time. Inside the enclosure, Simba was exploring. He'd grown noticeably in the weeks since the rescue, his kitten proportions giving way to the more defined features of adolescence. His movements were graceful, powerful, embodying the majesty his species was known for. He's gotten so much bigger, Nashipae observed. They grow quickly at this stage, David said proudly. And he's thriving. The experience hasn't set back his rehabilitation. If anything, it's given us new insights into his cognitive and emotional development. Jabari opened a small gate to enter a protected observation area within the enclosure. Simba immediately noticed them and approached, his focus settling particularly on Nashipae. He remembers you, David said with surprise. That's actually quite remarkable. Is that unusual? Nashipae asked. Very. Lions generally don't differentiate between individual humans unless they've had extensive, repeated contact. But Simba seems to recognize you specifically. Nashipae felt that same strange connection as the young lion regarded her with those intense amber eyes. What happens to him now? She asked softly. David exchanged a glance with Jabari. That's become a complex question. Simba's case has challenged many of our assumptions about wildlife rehabilitation. The traditional approach would be to minimize human contact and eventually release him into a protected pride territory, Jabari added. But given his demonstrated cognitive abilities and his unique history, several researchers, including myself and David, have proposed an alternative. David wheeled himself closer to the observation window. We're developing a new program, Conservation Ambassadors. Animals that, for various reasons, occupy a space between wild and domesticated. They can teach us about their species, help with research, and participate in conservation education. And Simba would be your first ambassador? Nashipae guessed. He's the perfect candidate, David confirmed. He has strong wild instincts, but he's formed selective bonds with humans. And after the rescue, the international community is invested in his story. The donations that have poured in. His voice caught with emotion. We can build something unprecedented here. They watched as Simba investigated a series of puzzle feeders placed around the enclosure, demonstrating problem-solving skills that impressed even Nashipae. The rescue wasn't just luck, was it? Nashipae said. You really did create that association deliberately. David nodded slowly. Yes and no. I worked with his natural instincts. Lions are intelligent, capable of complex associations. I created connections. Roads mean humans, humans mean safety when distressed, my beacon means me. But I never tested it. Never imagined I'd need to. He smiled ruefully. It was a desperate gamble that somehow worked. It saved your life, Nashipae said, and it may have changed his. The publicity has been overwhelming, Jabari interjected. But in the best way. We've received funding commitments that will support our ambassador program for the next 5 years. We're building a state-of-the-art facility where visitors can learn about East African wildlife through animals like Simba who can't be fully released. The Tanzania Wildlife Authority has officially endorsed the program, David added. And the Maasai Council has agreed to partner with us. We want this to be a bridge between traditional knowledge and modern conservation science. Nashipae felt a swell of pride. Her people had always understood the deep connections between humans and animals. Now, perhaps, the rest of the world was beginning to understand too. Speaking of recognition, Jabari said, the president's office called yesterday. They want to present you, David, and Simba with a special conservation honor at next month's National Parks Gala. David looked embarrassed. I told them Simba deserves all the credit, not me. I believe their response was that they don't have a protocol for giving national honors to lions, Jabari laughed. But they are creating a special conservation stamp featuring Simba's image. It will fund wildlife protection programs across the country. Nashipae smiled, remembering the small, desperate lion cub that had blocked the dusty road just weeks ago. Who could have imagined such a creature would save a life and potentially transform how people viewed the relationship between humans and wildlife? As if sensing her thoughts, Simba approached the observation window where Nashipae stood, making a soft chuffing sound that seemed almost like a greeting. "Would you like to offer him enrichment?" David asked, gesturing to a mechanical feeding device. "You can operate it from here, completely safe." Nashipae hesitated, then accepted. Under David's guidance, she activated the device, which released a large piece of meat on a rope that Simba had to work to obtain. He approached it with focused intensity, demonstrating both intelligence and natural hunting behaviors. "I never imagined I'd be this close to a lion," Nashipae admitted, watching Simba's powerful young body at work. "He's teaching us that wild isn't as simple a concept as we once thought," David said thoughtfully. "There's a spectrum of behaviors and adaptations. Simba is helping us understand that the line between wild and tame, between animal and ally, isn't as clear-cut as we imagined." "My grandmother used to tell stories," Nashipae said softly, "about the old days when Maasai warriors and lions understood each other. When we shared the land not as enemies but as, I don't know the English word. Not friends, but respected neighbors?" Jabari suggested. "Yes, exactly that." Nashipae watched Simba, now resting contentedly after his meal. "Maybe Simba is reminding us that those connections never really disappeared. We just forgot to look for them." 6 months later, Nashipae stood in the crowd at the grand opening of the East African Wildlife Ambassador Center. The Maasai Council had asked her to represent their community at the ceremony, but she would have attended anyway. She needed to see how Simba's story had evolved. The center was breathtaking, a harmonious blend of traditional East African architecture and modern facilities. Naturalistic habitats gave the animals space while allowing visitors to observe and learn. Educational displays, many incorporating Maasai traditional knowledge, explained the unique circumstances that had brought each animal to the ambassador program. Simba's habitat was the centerpiece, a spacious enclosure with koppies, rock outcroppings, acacia trees, and a water feature designed to mimic his natural environment. It allowed him to interact with researchers and participate in educational demonstrations while maintaining his dignity and natural behaviors. Dr. David Muriuki, now walking with only a slight limp, led the ribbon-cutting ceremony. He shared Simba's story with the assembled crowd, journalists, government officials, conservation leaders, and local community members, including many Maasai elders in their traditional red shukas. When David mentioned Nashipae's role in the rescue, he insisted she join him at the podium. Nashipae represented the best of traditional wisdom that day, he told the crowd, his voice carrying across the assembly. She didn't dismiss an animal's behavior as random. She recognized intelligence and purpose, even when it came in an unexpected form. She reminded us that indigenous knowledge about wildlife isn't superstition, it's accumulated wisdom from thousands of years of coexistence. The crowd applauded, and Nashipae felt a warmth spread through her chest. Her grandmother would have been proud. Afterward, as the crowd dispersed to tour the facility, David took Nashipae to a special observation area where they could see Simba up close. The young lion, now significantly larger and more muscular, lounged regally on a sun-warmed rock, seemingly unbothered by the admiring visitors. "He's become quite the celebrity," Nashipae observed with a smile. "Yes, but more importantly, he's becoming a true ambassador for his species," David said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "People who see him, who hear his story, they're donating to anti-poaching efforts, supporting habitat preservation, advocating for wildlife corridors. One lion has done more for conservation in 6 months than decades of traditional campaigns." Nashipae watched as Simba stretched luxuriously and repositioned himself, those intelligent amber eyes scanning the visitors before settling briefly on her with what seemed like recognition. "Do you ever wonder what he's thinking?" she asked. David smiled. "Every single day. But I've learned to respect the mystery. Simba reminds us that animals aren't just simplified versions of humans. They're different, complex in their own ways, worthy of respect on their own terms." As the sun began to set, casting golden light across the center, the same color as Simba's magnificent coat. Nashipae found herself reflecting on how a routine patrol about an animal blocking a road had cascaded into something that changed so many lives. David's, Simba's, her own, and now potentially thousands of visitors who would come to learn about the delicate balance between humans and wildlife. "You know," she said finally, "in my 9 years as a tracker, I've never had an experience quite like this one." David laughed. "I should hope not. Once in a lifetime is enough for me." They watched in comfortable silence as Simba, the lion cub who had once desperately sought human attention on a dusty road, now commanded it effortlessly. His very presence was a testament to the unexpected ways that humans and animals could impact each other's lives. In the fading light, as visitors reluctantly began to leave, Simba rose from his perch and approached the observation window where Nashipae stood. For a long moment, those amber eyes met hers, and Nashipae felt again that inexplicable connection. A bridge between two worlds, wild and human, each with lessons to teach the other. It was, Nashipae thought, a fitting end to an extraordinary story. And perhaps, as her grandmother might have said, it was also a beginning. A return to the old wisdom that her people had always known, that humans and animals were not separate, but part of the same great circle of life. As she walked back to her land cruiser under the emerging stars, Nashipae touched the beaded collar at her neck, a gift from her grandmother, who had taught her to read the land and respect all its creatures. She smiled, knowing that somewhere on the savanna, the old stories and the new science were finally finding common ground. And at the heart of it all was Simba, a small lion cub who had refused to give up, who had bridged the divide between wild and tame, and who had reminded them all that sometimes the most important lessons come from the most unexpected teachers.